Hi there, this is Ant here again, and I'm going to do a quick screencast for you here, covering how we create a new session in Pro Tools and what settings we should usually be using. So I'm going to switch to Pro Tools LE now using Command and Tab. Okay, and we can either go File, a new session, or we can use that shortcut, Command N. So I'm going to use that. So this is our new session window. In this instance, we're going to use create blank session. There are templates which you can use. You can also create your own template. So if you set up a session with the instruments and tracks the way you want, you can then save as template. See here? Save as template. So if you always want to start a certain way with a session, that's a good way of saving yourself some time. But we're going to use create blank session, and we are going to look at the session parameters. So first here, we've got audio file type, broadcast wave format, that stands for, .wav, that's what we want, that's the most universally compatible format we could use. Sample rate, 44.1 kilohertz, that's the same sample rate as a CD, and that's usually what we would want to use. Sometimes you may need to use 48, particularly if you're working with video or in broadcast. Now, the bit depth, we always work at 24-bit bit depth and then dither down to 16-bit when we bounce out. And the I/O settings, this is what you will often be presented with when you try to start a new session, is this last used option. You don't want to use that, because if the session that was used on this machine before was from a different studio, you will end up with all your inputs and outputs being messed up and not necessarily reflecting what's in your hardware. So on my system, I've got some custom I/O settings that I've made for different recording situations, but Pro Tools always has a few default ones. And if you're using an MBox based system or any similar kind of system with a small interface, stereo mix will usually work for you. So that's what I'm going to use in this instant. Okay, so if I click OK, and then it asks me where I want to put the session, and I'm just going to drop it on this external drive here. It's always good to not put the session on the system drive. Pro Tools or Avid don't recommend using the system drive at all, and there's a good reason for that, because the computer has to access the application at the same time as the audio, so it makes much more sense to use an external drive. If you're working on the machines in the teaching rooms, in G127, we have the temp hard drive, which is like a separate physical hard drive in the machine. In the studios, we have media drives on each machine. That's where you should put your session. Okay, so I'm going to call this Screencast Demo. So I've just given it the name there, and when I click save, it will make the session and make a folder for it with all the subfolders inside. So if you watch now, so if I go back to the Finder, you can see here we've got this folder here, Screencast Demo. And if I double click on that, this is the structure of a Pro Tools session. Okay, I'll just zoom in. So once you make the session, you will always have these folders. You've obviously got the audio files folder for any audio files you put in. Fade files is for the fades you create on the audio. Region groups stores your region groups that you create in the session. And then video files is if you drop any video in. The wave cache is just a sort of cache file which stores data relating to the waveforms, to displaying the waveforms. Okay, so I'll zoom back out. So that's our session there. Now it's really important that you know where you've put your session. Okay, I've lost count of the number of times students have lost a lot of hard work because they didn't stop for 2 seconds to think where they were putting their session. And also, I must reiterate at this point, it is your responsibility to keep the latest version of your session on your own drive. Okay, so by all means, you can use the drives in the studios and in the teaching rooms to work on, but you must always have a copy. Okay, right, so I'm going to go back to Pro Tools. So this is the main arrange screen of our session, or the edit screen, I should say. So just a couple of shortcuts that I always get asked when teaching, and it's very important to know them. Command and equals. That switches between the edit window and the mix window. Okay. Now at the moment I've got the edit window and the mix window full screen, so I could just like, if I pull this one back halfway, and then if I do the same with the mix window, so I can actually get them both on the screen at the same time, okay? But even then, if I do Command and equals, you'll still see Pro Tools switching between the two of them, okay? So it changes what the active window is. So there we go. We've got our new session created. We know where it is, and we've used the right I/O settings. We've used the stereo mix I/O settings. So if I have a look in Setup I/O, we'll see the interface I'm using, which is the Mbox 2. These are the outputs. So we've got output 1 and 2 left and right there. And if I go to input, we've got input 1 and 2 left and right there. And then there's also the digital input there, which I'm not using anyway. Okay. There's only one input available, one insert, sorry, available on this. But again, I won't really be using that. And then there's all our buses ready to be named. Okay. So I'll leave it at that for now, and watch this space for further screencasts. Thanks for watching and listening.